Good morning, good afternoon. I'm happy to welcome the participants and the guests of our roundtable, Low Carbon Footprint Future N+ group on the way to carbon neutrality, climatic partnership, Russian climatic partnership organization, which was founded in 2016. Over this period, this organization was joined by 35 companies. About 50 events have been conducted in 2022 alone, 7 events conducted by the partnership. This organization was founded as the platform for discussion, opinion exchange, experience exchange, inviting experts to synchronize the action plans, the agenda, with international and Russian specialists and experts in this area. And I'm ready to welcome, I'm happy to welcome online. We have Andrey, SHARONOV, the CEO of National Energy Alliance, and Mr. Chris Bayless, Standards Director of ISI. And we also have today in the main room, Evgeniy SHVARTS, the senior environmentalists of the Russian Federation, the head of the Natural Resources Stewardship and National Geographic Institute, Anna ROMANOVSKAYA. We have the director of Institute of Global Climate and Environment, and also she's Academician in Israel, and Maxim KOCHETKOV, who is the head of the Sustainable Development section of Moscow Stock Exchange. We also are joined by my colleagues in N+ group, Elena Ivanova, the head of capital markets and relations with investors, and Irina BAKHTINA, sustainability director for metals and mining sector of N+, which is a company called RUSAL. You might know this. And also at the beginning, as we open the event, to say a few words about the context for you to get a better view into the topics of what we're going to discuss today. Last week in the Far Eastern Economic Forum, Maxim, the Minister of Environmental Development, confirmed that on top priority lists of Russia, we still have transformation of our economy into lower carbon footprint innovations and providing assistance from the state to the companies developing and opening new markets. And everybody understands quite perfectly that the companies are living through hard times. You know, when foreign partners went away, clients are gone from Russia, there are logistical issues, all the supply chain is changing, building up anew. Green finance is over, green funding is about to, is dwindling. Will the companies be able to overcome these challenges and difficulties? I know SG Alliance, in cooperation with KEPT agency, have prepared a study. A study was covering the Asian and Pacific region and the Middle East. And this study showed this, taking different countries from these regions have absolutely different requirements, different standards, different relations with the climatic agenda today, different requirements for accountability, green accountability standards are different. Stock exchange, they vary in their opinion, varying in their requirements for providing this green funding. And my question is to Andrey, what in your opinion is happening in the global context, and whether the Russian companies are able to fit into this narrow context of today's reality? Will they be able to find new opportunities and markets? Can you hear me? Andrey is answering. Unmute your microphone. Yes, I unmuted your my microphone. The main boardroom does not have SHARONOV's microphone. I can hear him perfectly. He's switching into the Russian channel. Maybe that is the issue. Can you hear? Yes, absolutely. Great. Thank you. Sorry, was my mistake. I was on the English channel. Well, a couple of words about this. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. A couple of words about my alliance. Was set up in January by 38 Russia's biggest companies. We started our activity in May earlier this year, and you were talking about the study that we did together with KEPT. The main rationale behind this study is not only to compare different approaches in these countries, but Asia, Southern Pacific, Middle East, they have their own national agendas, and to a major extent, they're looking to the highest international standards. So basically, they are trying to bring together the national interests, national requirements, bringing them as close as possible to the international standards to be mutually acceptable. Talking about how rigid, how severe the requirements are. Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Look at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The requirements are much severer than London stock exchanges. Talking about this financial accountability. So complying with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange rules much harder than London, than trying to comply with London Stock Exchange. Back to your question, what's happening after February in Russia, after February this year? Well, in this sense, I think the alliance is not really representing Russia, because we have many companies with a lot of experience working in Russia, but a lot of companies over 10 years have been publishing, they have not been publishing their accounts, their accountability, their reports. We cannot consolidate any data talking about these companies, but the priority of the agenda is going down, But another study that we did in cooperation with the platform, that's the name of the company, they're showing that in the midterm, the companies are looking at the priorities of the green or carbon footprint agenda much higher than last year. So it kind of went down, the importance of this. People, for obvious reasons, stopped looking at this carefully, but right now they're getting back as they recover from various shocks, And why is it important to keep the agenda as high priority as possible? Because we need to accumulate the potential and build up further, just to understand how the companies care about the national economy's growth. Because Russia, luckily, we see ourselves as part of the global markets, as its part and we understand we need to be present and to stay present in the international markets. So these requirements are not only about the Western standards. Oriental or Middle East, like Asian or Russian markets, are getting closer to international standards, and we make these standards harder to more severe every year. And we have our own national standards for sustainable development. We have our own agenda, which accelerates the action plans and becomes more robust. Of course, we understand we're doing this amid the special conditions, special circumstances that we have today, but still Russia does not abandon this agenda to cut the emissions, to focus on recultivation of forests, etc., etc., etc. I'm not mentioning all this, but the tempo is slowing down, but the interests are shifting from climatic interests, from climatic agenda, to closer issues, let's say local environmental issues, and where we may exercise our influence on local level. And then, people, community stakeholders, regional authorities paying a lot of attention to their local agendas rather than international or big national. So it's kind of reorienting from bigger goals to smaller goals, but in full line and full compliance with the Russian agenda. First of it is a reduction of toxic and atmospheric emissions, not only greenhouse gas. By the way, it's very important now that Russia is looking at local levels social policies, keeping the jobs, keeping the salaries as high as possible, keeping the living standards, quality of the family lives, etc. So it's kind of a more extensive agenda for social responsibility. And of course, Russia mostly abandons the agenda in order to provide, to get ratings, to obtain ratings, in order to cooperate with investors and finance communities. But in my experience working with Bank of Russia, National Bank of Russia, cooperating with ISG Alliance, we renewed the relations. We have new requirements for accounts. It's now soft. Next year it's going to be more severe. And in conclusion, I would like to say that right now, inside the alliance, we have 5 committees. These 5 committees will be supervising the bulk of the activities: environmental, climatic, and all this health and safety. By the way, this committee is headed by Irina BAKHTINA, I can see her sitting on this round table, and Anton Butmanov is also one of the head of the committees, and I'm happy. And 4 other committees: first, infrastructure committee, which will be dealing with the standards, ratings, and one of the biggest projects that we have launched recently, that's the ESG mapping of all the infrastructure in Russia. And 3rd committee, that's green funding committee, headed by the representative of SBER, Tatiana Zavyalova. Also social policy, social responsibilities committee, headed by Yulia Mazanova, Deputy CEO for ISG and social policy of Metalla Invest, and also the International Cooperation Committee, one of the important committees here, and this committee is headed by Viktor Drozdov. Polis Zolota, thank you very much. Andrey SHARONOV was with us. He's still with us, but to look at how big companies comply with their obligations, you can go to Net Zero Tracker, the platform, which online provides all the data, comparable tables. You can compare regions, you can compare countries to countries. One of the companies which is present on this tracker, it's N+, the group N+. But I'd like to say there are about, as of now, about 2,000 companies in this tracker. Only 763 companies of this 2,000 have announced the specific steps in their agenda they are making in this or taking in this area. N+ is the first ever company in the climatic partnership which announced the clear goals to get the goal of carbon footprint neutrality or zero. In September, we have by September earlier this year, we had the roadmap, and September 2022, a year ago, we started. Right now, 12 months later, we decided to ask N+ to share their views, their results, interim results, what has been done, what slowed down, failures, setbacks, but mostly the success stories, to share with us today the challenges that they have overcome to inspire other participants of the climatic partnership and partners of ISG Alliance to follow suit. And the floor is given to Irina BAKHTINA, Irina Ivanova. Please, your presentations.
Thank you very much. Hello, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for given us an opportunity to show you a report from our group on the work that we have done. To start, I would like to say a few words. I would like to explain a few words about the N+ group. Yes, can we see the slides? Yes, we can see. Probably that N+ group is the global leader in aluminum production outside of China. The RUSAL share is 5.6% of all aluminum produced in the world. It's also an independent producer of energy, one of the largest ones in the world. So the company has approximately 60 assets and operates in 12 countries on 5 continents, and it has more than 90,000 employees, and it has vertical integration, of course. And so the company, because being like that, it understands very well how important the climatic agenda is for global supply chains and for our global consumers all around the world. That is why our efforts to reduce carbon footprint also have an aim to improve our economic efficiency in the long run. One of good examples is the promotion of low carbon aluminum, LAU brand name. This is done as part of our metals segment. And in 2021, the share of LAU sales of the total sales, primary aluminum sales of the company was 25%, so approximately 1 million tons, which is quite a lot. Despite the difficult situation in the world, we can see that global trends in the climate agenda are preserved, and this is confirmed by the fact that we can see growing demand, and we are sure that the demand will continue growing for low carbon products. And aluminum is in high demand from that perspective for the global green transition purposes, because aluminum is used in solar and wind power generation, and it also is used for the storage of RSE energy. It's also used for electro vehicles and all this. In our assessments, we think that the demand for this type of product until 2030 may grow from existing 4.4 million tons to 14.5 million tons, which we think is a significant potential for the application of our product. So a few words about the achievements in the financial markets. I think we will get into more details as we continue our presentation, but despite this, the company RUSAL has two credit facilities, pre-export credit facilities linked to KPIs, to specific targets which the company has committed to achieve in the field of ESG. So, and because of that, we were able to achieve real results up to now in terms of commercial efficiency. I'm talking about commercial efficiency. We were able to reduce the rate by 15 basis points. Unfortunately, there is no access for Russian companies at the moment to global credit markets. So that is why we think that those tools we are going to consider them in the internal domestic market in Russia, and we are ready to look at all possible options here. And despite the turmoil in the financial markets, we can see some interest from the investment community. And at this moment, that's primarily Russian investors. We are a public company. That is why this is an important topic for us. Next slide, please. A few words about our business model. Our competitive advantage of N+ Group is complete integration of hydropower assets, which provide energy to power supplies to the aluminum smelters. And this business model allows us to be effective economically, and 80% of our needs are covered by in-house assets, bauxite and nepheline included, and these are the basis for aluminum smelting. And 98% of aluminum is produced with green hydropower, which provides us a low level of cost. If you look at the cost curve globally, then RUSAL will be in top 10 producers in terms of its cost curve. And also we have low carbon production of aluminum. And it all shows that the climate agenda for the group is very important and vital. So now I would like to move on to the achievements that we have received and maybe specific projects. Next slide, please. Like Olga mentioned, N+ Group was one of the companies, was one of the first companies in Russia to set targets to become net zero by 2050. Then we have also intermediary target, 35% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But also this initiative appeared not out of the thin air, but not in 2021. We took specific action to publicly disclose those targets, and some of the projects and some of the work was done by RUSAL and other assets starting in 2007, when we set the first climate targets for the sustainable future. And now I would like to give the floor to Irina, because she will give us more details about climate projects of RUSAL.
The first point was 2007, 15 years ago, the strategy for safe future. What's important that the company has been setting a set of such goals that are measurable, specific, being ahead of them in some cases, and set other goals to achieve. And these goals set by RUSAL, and we are focusing on, they have been adopted back in 2017 up to 2025. And I would like to know two of them you can see on the slide. One of them really important is purchasing electric power from renewable sources. For this goal, we set the task up to 2025 to buy none less than 95% of such carbon-less energy. And based on the result of this year here, we have been holding public hearings, and we have been reporting that about 99% or even more, we are currently buying for our aluminium plants hydro energy. Another important goal is reduction of direct partial emissions of greenhouse gases by 15% to 2025, again, compared to 2014. It's really important here for experts, you know, what goals and achievements are about. Those low-hanging fruits, easily attainable baselines for the company. You know that 2014, that's not easy for us, because I already told you what a hard path we have followed, and by 96% we have reduced direct, by 11% we have reduced those partial emissions of greenhouse gases by moving our port lines to eco-friendly Soderberg. Elena has mentioned Allow. This is our low carbon aluminum brand. 1 out of 4 tons sold on the market today by RUSAL is green aluminum. This is in demand in the Western and Eastern markets. And this million of tons were now close to. This is the growth over the past year by 44% since we launched in 2017. We're now at this point of million tons, and over our scope 1 and scope 2, we have 4 tons of emissions and CO2 equivalent. Average across the globe is 3 times as high, and this is the additional value that's really important for our overseas and Russian customers. Elena, thank you. Irina, thank you so much. Next slide, please. Now, we have mentioned already that in September last year, the company has published a roadmap on decarbonization of the entire group, and collaborating with BTI, we have been working on our roadmap, advancing it. Despite adjustments and challenges we are facing, particularly currently, we're continuing just following our goals. And the projects to decarbonize have been elaborated upon in 2 segments of the group. And again, I would like to give the floor back to Irina, and we will discuss the metallurgy segment. I think it's really very important, and the experts have said about that already. we are discussing it because today in all the realities, we are double checking the actions we're going to implement up to 2030. It's important that here we have the whole spectrum of possible technological and compensational solutions, the whole range and palette. Technologically, at the alumina division, those are the increase of energy efficiency and in the context of aluminum production of port lines. Here we move to eco-Soderberg pre-baked anodes, this advanced technology of an inert anode, renewable energy sources, hydrogen, moving transport to biofuel, and electric power. This is recycling without secondary material resources and circular economy. It's clear that we cannot otherwise solve decarbonization tasks. Just a few words about the technologies, because here we experts are interested in this section of our reporting, moving aluminum smelters to eco-Soderberg. And what's the difference from the classical Soderberg adopted historically? This is reduction in perfluorocarbons, and this technology is continued to be implemented in Irkutsk, Novokuznetsk, and other smelters in Krasnoyarsk. It has been almost implemented, and the first half of the current year at these smelters, 180 of new pots have been implemented based on this technology and commissioned. If we are speaking about pre-baked anodes, this technology allows us reducing GHG emissions by 25%. We are achieving certain indicators, and now we are saying that we are shifting to another step, growing forward. And because of this technology, because of the huge high-scale project of ecological upgrades of our Siberian plants, we are going to produce 535,000 tons on Krasnoyarsk and Bratsk, and Irkutsk it's about 235, and Novokuznetsk 75,000 tons of aluminum per year. I know it is our pride, and our international customers are interested in that. This is an advanced technology replacing carbon anodes by inert anodes that are not spent, and we are eliminating GHG emissions during electrolysis, and we are getting CO2 as a side product. And these industrial ports over the period of evaluation of this technology, scalability, and has produced 73 tons of aluminum with the lowest carbon footprints globally. And last year in Glasgow, the climatic conference of the UN parties, we had a separate pavilion for this neutral carbon-free aluminum represented by EN+, and lots of people wanted to take pictures before the stand, because this is the metal of the future, of course. For our alumina business, I would say that here we have the widest spectrum of areas. We have engaged increasing of heat insulation, energy efficiency of our equipment, tubings, improvement of technological processes in production, and in all our alumina refineries, we have adopted plans and actions to improve energy efficiency. Internationally speaking about our alumina refinery, Guinness Alumina in Ireland continues their project to shift the steam production from carbon fuel to electric power. Those are electric boilers that engage the measures of state support from European Union and Ireland. this facilitates this process for us as well. And at the alumina refinery of Windalk in Jamaica, they are modernizing their lighting to solar power. And last but not least, I would say really promising and interesting technology of capturing, working with our alumina refineries. We're looking at those projects and researchers, the suggestions we are getting. We are elaborating our own capturing technology using alkaline water, mud water, and different wet gas degassing facilities as well. This we're using in our calcination areas and purification of heat power stations. Capturing of CO2 can be as high as 10%. And here I would like to give the floor to Elena so that she says about the energy sector.
So the power segment does not lag behind. One of the key projects in 2021-2022 was and is the stock taking of greenhouse gas emissions from the water reservoirs. And basically, according to the developing international scientific understanding, the water reservoirs both emit and capture greenhouse gases. And water reservoirs, we are talking about water reservoirs that we have in N+ group. So we don't use any global average figures. Instead, we decided to commit to take our own measurements for those water reservoirs. In 2021, in particular, for the water reservoir in Bratsk and Ust-Ilimsk hydropower plants, we took measurements in autumn, and also in 2022, we took measurements during the winter period for Bratsk hydropower plant, and our preliminary results show that we have low levels of emissions from water reservoirs. That's number one. Number two, we continue modernizing our HPPs. The name of the program is New Energy, and the target of it is to increase power generation from existing HPPs and to replace coal power generation. In 2021, we commissioned new turbine in Irkutsk HPP, and we started replacing another turbine in Irkutsk HPP. In 2021, we also replaced completely one runner of Krasnoyarsk HPP, and we're doing the same for another runner. And the program has helped us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2.4 million CO2 equivalent. Tons of CO2 equivalent. We think that we can go up to 2.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2026. In addition to that, the group continues to build new projects and to develop green energy. And it is consistent with low carbon development strategy taken by the Russian Federation. And we get involved in social and economic development in the regions where we operate. This is important for us. In Malaya Sigarskaya HPP, we are building head race and tail race channels, and it will be commissioned. This HPP will be commissioned in 2023. And we also have some other smaller HPP projects which are being developed, which are being investigated. We are looking for potential sources of finance, of CapEx for those HPPs, and we are evaluating environmental risks and social risks of those projects. Also, there is a contribution from the hydrogen energy, and we are developing a project to develop tank containers to transport liquid hydrogen. And this project in particular will help us to solve the problem of transporting long distance transportation of hydrogen, which is at the moment the biggest problem with hydrogen. Also, we have a project to develop a concept for hydrogen infrastructure in Krasnoyarsk. And in addition to that, I would like to mention that decarbonizing of the power segment of the group will not only be based on the development of hydropower generation, but also the modernization of CHPs, because we want to move our coal generation to gas generation, gas-fired generation. It will help us to reduce the amount of emissions. It will help improve environmental conditions in, for example, in Irkutsk region. And but there is one but. To provide gas supplies will require additional capex, a lot of capex, and we support the intentions of the government to build gas pipelines to all those regions, and we're ready to participate in those modernizing projects and to support the infrastructure building projects. And we are in discussions with the government at different levels, looking at different possible projects like that. And in addition to that, I would like to mention that together with our partners, we are thinking about projects to develop technologies to capture, utilize, and store carbon, including such projects in Irkutsk region, where we can see some potential for CO2 storages. One more thing to mention is that the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the power segment of our company is related to the improvement of the power generation, and also improvements in terms of the transportation of energy. That is why we are also modernizing the pump stations and the grids. And we are also optimizing the modes in which our equipment operates. And as a result of that project, since 2021 and until the middle of 2022, the direct emissions of greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced by 4.8 million tons CO2 equivalent. And in 2021, we developed a program to improve energy efficiency in the power segment. It includes projects to modernize equipment of the grids and transportation lines. And as a result of those projects in 2021 and earlier this year, we have been able to save almost 140,000 kilowatt hours, which is equivalent of approximately 53,000 of CO2 equivalent. And so basically we were able to prevent the indirect emissions of greenhouse gases. Irina, now your turn, please. Well, it's important to mention here that speaking about general picture about all the actions that we have described together with Elena, well, we have to say that in any decarbonizing strategy, if you take any company, well, there is always some room for offsetting. Well, we can debate a lot about this, and there are different positions expressed by European governments, but we understand that in the current environment, given the current conditions, now that we don't have technologies to achieve that net zero, we should pay more attention to offset projects. And RUSAL, as the metal segment company, takes a lot of efforts to make such projects assessed and appraised independently, including by the Institute for Global Climate and Environment and by some other third parties, to make sure that the methodologies that we use be verified at the international level, because we are talking about real results. And in order to achieve them, I mean, there are not so many regulating documents at the international level. So 1,001,000 of trees have been planted by the company in Irkutsk and in Krasnoyarsk. Then 500,000 hectares were previously uncontrolled forests. Now these are forests regulated or protected by aerial services. It helps us to 440,000 tons of CO2 capturing. So I don't know, it's a kind of it's an offsetting effect for that sequestration. Yes, the capture. This is what we're discussing now. And of course, we are thinking about new forestry projects. We have some of them in the pipeline for the marshes and for some peat areas, and we are thinking about, we are assessing them, how effective they can be cost-wise and carbon emissions wise. So what's the benefit for the company? I mean, we could instead sit and wait for some standards to appear sometime later and in the Russian Federation and outside, but being proactive like this in those areas where we don't have regulations yet and we don't have many international standards yet, but being proactive helps us to test the pros and cons of all those projects and then share our experience with the experts. And it helps us a lot now to participate, for example, to share our lessons learned with those people who develop the forestry strategies for the country in order to make it more effective in the future.
Okay, we have told you about those projects that have been implemented and are continuing to be implemented at the level of our group. But of course, now we're all living in sophisticated times. And I would like to tell you about the challenges of 2022 already. We are committed to our goals. We are facing inevitably new realities. First and foremost, I would like to speak, and Irina has already touched upon this subject, that Russian companies, not just we, have faced this limitation and restriction of connections with international organizations, and to this geopolitical organization affects the willingness of international partners to cooperate and the capabilities to promote decarbonization on the global market. As the connections are being broken, and this negatively affects the speed of decarbonization. Some international partners have stopped our membership because they have been requested by other participating countries. This prevented us from participating into some global projects like standards-based targets for nature or hydroenergy standard from International Hydropower Association. Again, I would repeat, we're not dropping our commitments, and lots of our partners are still with us. For example, the UN Global Compact and the Coalition of Leaders on Carbon Pricing Initiative for Aluminium Stewardship Initiative and the Aluminium Institute. Here I would like to give the floor to Irina and continue speaking about the challenges that we are facing. Of course, our interaction with the global rating agencies have got certain challenges, and key was for us a carbon disclosure project that exists since the year 2000, and we are providing reporting since 2016 from CDP client and CDP water. And in this respect, what our participation in this rating gives us, that the disclosure of our GHG emissions and steps to reduce the emissions, it has enabled us to position ourselves in the context of our customers. This was requested by our customers. We got up to 100 requests per year, and showed ourselves as the company that put a lot of efforts in this respect. About 200 pages took this reporting with all the actions, with all the approaches and geographies where the company is represented. This is a serious report that helps analyzing the situation and give high quality feedback. And I would remind you that over the past 2 years in 2021, we had A- in CDP climate. This is the highest rating globally in the world's aluminium sector. This shows our openness and maturity in the climatic agenda in our business perimeter. Despite the limitations that we have faced, we applied this year for CDP climate and CDP water. They have been considered. No one rejected our applications so that we can share them with our customers at their request. Of course, this is of key importance for us. And to continue about the challenges, I would like to mention about one more challenge we have faced in 2021 is that the international system of green energy certificates, IREC, has left the Russian market. They have invested a lot of their efforts to develop this market here in Russia, having become the first Russian company that entered the market in January 2021. And over this period, we sold 1.7 million of certificates and contracted for reducing emissions for our partners. And today we're continuing maintaining and working with IREC, but here we think that it's important to maintain and support the national system for certification. Challenge-wise, I would like to mention the overall situation with the legislature for environmental protection that continues to get stronger. That's of course good, but on the other hand, that's some additional challenge both for the corporate side and for the company. In 2022, the number of cities that quote emissions that have to be reduced twofold. This is an experiment, and also they're expanding the requirements for control and monitoring around industrial sites. High barriers are put by the state ecological expertise. All those challenges we can and will tackle. Of course, I would like to say it once again, we are staying true to our commitments that we have adopted. Let's continue and speak about evaluation of finance risks and possibilities. Despite the challenges that we're now discussing, despite any challenges, climatic risks can affect any enterprise, for example, our group. As the analysis of climatic risks and opportunities has shown, according to TCRD requirements that we have made last year, we have analyzed our actions to reduce risks and mitigate risks and their effects, updated the actions and lists of our risks, and we are continuing updating the registry. For detailed results of the analysis and recommendations, please see our report on sustainable development for 2021, mentioned by Irina. As an example for energy segment, we are evaluating climate risks for hydropower, physical risk factors for hydropower plants. This is a big scientific work, and together with the Water Institute of the Russian Academy of Science, we are adapting hydropower plants in Angara Cascade. And we expect that as a result of this work, by 2024, we'll get evaluations for water resources for different climatic scenarios up to 2030, 2050, and until the end of the century. Apart from these forecasts, we are expecting getting results on adaptation measures.
Well, I would like to mention here that we appreciate greatly the fact that the work to identify risks and opportunities have included the RUSAL's assets. I mean, 3 assets belonging to RUSAL were included in that risk assessment. And maybe you will have some questions on that topic. And before you ask them, maybe I will answer them before that. What are the risk factors for the aluminum smelters, primarily, for example, in Siberia and the Urals? Abnormal rain, weather conditions, hot waves, and also cold conditions. And recently, for example, we have seen a lot of hot waves in this summer, this year. And that's important that the risk assessment that we made for some model assets belonging to the company has shown that the probability of those, that those risks will occur in the long term is low. And we are not planning to shelve this study and just being happy about having done it. But no, we want to take another step. We want to develop an action plan. This is an expectation. We should develop a plan how we can adapt to those climatic changes and then maybe proliferate the findings to the entire company, to the entire RUSAL as part of that action plan. Thank you. And to conclude, I think maybe a few words about the contribution of our group into the global agenda, decarbonizing agenda. Well, on your own, you cannot solve such large tasks. And if only one participant takes action, he will never be able to achieve such global targets. That is why we have to unite with this sector and with our peers. One of the important strategies to cooperate with our peers is to be open and to provide access to the information from the company. I will repeat myself. We have mentioned it several times that we issue our sustainability reports on an annual basis, and we disclose information about the projects that we are running, and we do it also as part of the partnerships that we have. Experience of N+ and RUSAL in the field of reduction of greenhouse gases is a good best practice, and it has been remarked in the coalition of the partners to the carbon pricing program. It was mentioned in 2021, and we are appreciated at the global level. Until 2021, N+ Group was recognized as a global partner and the only sponsor of Climatic Accelerator of the Global Compact of the United Nations. And that was a program which was appreciated among global companies. CPLC also gave high appreciation of RUSAL internal pricing for the carbon, and that RUSAL uses to make investment decisions to achieve its climatic targets, and also having committed to increase production of clean energy and to support wider access to clean energy. N+ Group has been adopted as the first Russian company in the initiative of UN Energy. Now, Irina, your turn to continue the same topic. Well, Elena has mentioned all the global initiatives and national initiatives in which the group and its metals company has been participating. But 1 year ago, as part of the Conference of Parties 26 in Glasgow, which took place in November last year, RUSAL initiated a wide and comprehensive discussion of all the challenges facing the aluminum sector. And from the point of view of decarbonization and all of this as part of the new scenario, it was discussed last time. This below 1.5 degrees scenario, you remember. And back then, everybody understood and understand until now that we need to revise completely the scope of CapEx, the scope of our projects that we're thinking about, and the technologies that we're going to use. And it's important to mention that Chris Bale is the head of standardizing in the Aluminum Stewardship Initiative. He participated in that discussion, and since then the organization, the ASI, were able to make the necessary changes to this standard, which is most important standard for us, ASI performance standard, and we use that standard to produce our public non-financial reporting. Well, Chris has said hello to all of us, and he has joined us from London. I would like to welcome Chris, and hello.
Good afternoon, Irina. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much. Thank you. So, look, we're a global sustainability standards setting and certification body for the global aluminium value chain. So we're very focused on aluminum in particular, and we're a multi-stakeholder organization as well. So Irina, when you talked about the standard evolving and developing, the way that works is through discussion between industrial players all the way along the value chain, including RUSAL, ASI member since 2015 and a certifying entity since 2019. Customers, who are also part of our certifying group, and civil society. So it's a negotiated standard reflecting the latest science. And as you mentioned, that 1.5 degree scenario is now embedded within our performance standard. But it's worthwhile mentioning that our performance standard is not limited to greenhouse gases. And I think this has been talked about earlier on as well, that as the industry decarbonizes, and the kind of decarbonisation we're talking about is from 1.1 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent today to 50 million tonnes mid-century, while growing supply to meet growing demand. As that happens, other risks also come into play, and our standard is about managing those risks writ large. So while greenhouse gases are certainly high on the agenda, human rights due diligence risks, risks associated with water, nature positive solutions and increased circularity are all part of our standard. And so it's worthwhile saying that certifying against our performance standard gives some assurance to customers or to investors or others that a company or an entity has a 1.5 degree aligned pathway. And I'll talk a bit about what that is in a moment. But it doesn't just give assurance about that, it gives assurance that there are systems in place to deal with associated risks. And we should be very open and honest that some green or low carbon solutions present risks. So hydropower brings with it water risks. You talked about these adaptation risks in the future, Elena. So hydropower does not come without other risks. And so our standard is about managing some of those. So RUSAL has been an active participant, as I say, in the development of those standards, currently one of our board of directors as well. And as a low carbon or a lower carbon producer, one might think that RUSAL and other low carbon producers around the world might sit on their laurels. You know, existing low carbon hydropower energy base, less far to go to meet targets mid-century. But the truth is that every participant along the value chain, the aluminium value chain, and that includes customers, needs to decarbonize in unprecedented ways by mid-century, requiring levels of investment the like of which we haven't seen before. Not just high emitters, but also some of the lowest emitters as well, and for customers to demand low carbon products as well. And we've built that into the new version of our standard, which says that entities, no matter where they operate along the value chain, and RUSAL's certifying entity covers bauxite mining, alumina refining, smelting, and semi-fabrication. No matter where you sit on that chain, even if you are a customer, you will need to have a 1.5 degree mid-century pathway articulated with associated targets and an actual plan to get there, the kind of plan that we saw outlined earlier on today. That means that customers who are certifying against our standard will need to include indirect emissions that are embedded in the materials they consume. So they will need to be demanding low carbon products, and the producers of those products will need to be decarbonising through, as we've heard today, increased access to renewable energy. In certain parts of the world, grid connection, novel technologies, new ways of getting heat and steam. We've heard all about some of those technologies this morning as well. So that's what our standard is doing. It's saying, no matter where you sit today, whether you're a high emitter or a low emitter, no matter where in the value chain you sit, whether you're bauxite mining, alumina refining, smelting, or semi-fabrication, or even downstream customer, you have a role to play, and you will need to demonstrate that role by setting targets, measurable targets, and demonstrating performance against those targets. A key part of that, we've heard it expressed today, is around transparency and comparability in the kind of data that is being communicated. And so in our new version of our standard, version 3 of the performance standard, we ask for a breakdown of emissions by source. We want to understand not just the corporate emissions writ large, but the specific emissions of processes or assets. We want to see how they're expected to change over time and specific targets associated with them. But importantly, we also need verification of those numbers. And for us at ASI, third-party verification is very important. It's how our standards are certified. We, ASI, don't do the certifying. We don't do the assurance ourselves. It's third-party audit firms and individuals that actually audit companies against which we convey certification. So that third-party verification, comparability of data sets, and transparency is very important and has been embedded in the performance standard. In terms of how that develops over time, this is an interesting discussion, right? Because we were driven initially, ASI was launched as kind of a market mechanism almost. It was a way to demonstrate performance against some environment, governance and social issues, demonstrate that performance to customers downstream, and an assurance of performance conveyed by this third-party verification. So it was the market pull for low carbon, high recycled content, green, responsibly sourced metal that drove ASI. And we have a chain of custody standard which is applied to do that, so that when you are consuming metal, customer group, you can be assured that there's a certain performance along the value chain. It's worthwhile mentioning that RUSAL has chain of custody certification for a number of its assets all along the value chain. So that ability to communicate with the customer is there. But what we've been seeing in the last couple of years in particular is really accelerated, and it's the theme today, right, is that while there is that market pull for low carbon, responsibly sourced metal, increasingly the questions that we are being asked isn't necessarily by customer groups, it's by investors who understand that the kind of decarbonisation that's required by the aluminium sector, and indeed all sectors, is going to require not just a measure of emissions reduction, but also a measure that is done in a responsible way. And so ASI certification is almost being seen, I think, in some areas as a way for investors to understand not just the greenhouse gas implications of their investments, but broader ESG implications as well, ensuring that those risks are managed. So that's an interesting development. I think how we offer investors some of that surety, I think it can be done through our existing products, but we might see that developing in the future as well. Another element that we expect to see, I would think, certainly out there somewhere, is a way of standardizing carbon footprint of delivered products. And that doesn't, there isn't really a standard globally now about low carbon aluminium products.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I think, yes, because we have the interpreters, they should do their job. Of course, my question was, how was this new performance standards reflected in our work and in the aluminum sector? I think that we have heard the answer and what we have told with Elena today and what we have heard from Chris and our other respected experts. It shows that in decarbonization, we have a field for initiative and we are demonstrating it but not so much space for voluntarism, I would say. There's standards and use cases, scenarios adopted globally. First, we thought about 2 degrees. Now we have been corrected to 1.5 degrees, and this has to be streamlined and accelerated. And those yearly meetings where we are getting your advice, this of course helps us to drive forward our strategy to drive to net zero. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Now,
well, I'm receiving now questions from our viewers in the text chat and on my mobile. Well, you can see all of those questions, but I want to read one of them. Okay, I have rephrased it a little bit. One of the challenges is the restrictions on the green investment, green capital markets. RUSAL and N+, have they felt somehow? Have you felt the restrictions? Well, Elena mentioned 2 syndicated pre-export credit facilities that we have. But from my side, I would like to mention something, because on a weekly basis, we have to check how we are progressing. But the pre-export facility, $1.085 billion, was the first transaction of that kind in the Russian market. It's a 5-year credit facility, and we have to set targets and to report against those targets on an annual basis. And I am dealing with the sustainable development in the metal sector. And it's important for me that bankers, that lenders ask us about our greenhouse gas emissions, about our carbon footprint. They care about specific levels of sales of alloy metal, and they assess us based on the demand for that product in the market. So they care about environmental indicators, including fluoride emissions, for example, from the smelting process. That is very important, and it provides stimulus to myself and my team, all those people who talk to the lenders, to the banks, and these are famous banks, one of the leading banks in like Raiffeisen and City General and all this. Thank you very much, colleagues. We have a request for some comments. We have Natalia Torpeda. She's an executive director of the Global Compact branch of Global Compact. Please give the mic to Natalia. Hello, colleagues. I would like to, first of all, say the huge contribution of RUSAL and N+ group to our low carbon future. According to the Global Compact, and me being the representative of that compact, RUSAL has been the member of that Global Compact for 20 years, and N+ group joined in 2019. And the experience shared between RUSAL and N+ has helped the companies to produce unique expertise in global sustainable development at the global level. Both companies have a relationship with global platforms, and like we said before, both companies are participants and partners of some most serious global initiatives, the Sustainable Development Council, N+ joined in 2019, and also International Coalition for Sustainable Growth. So in the past 2 or 3 years, there has been a breakthrough in the climate agenda and in the extent of our participation, of your participation in such global initiatives, such effective global platforms. And the fact that N+ has become a member to the climate accelerator of the Global Compact is also a huge contribution, a huge step forward. And now we are facing, in addition to the challenges of the Paris Agreement and the challenging tasks that were set as part of that Paris Agreement, the Russian companies, in addition to that, are now facing the changing international infrastructure and changes in the relationship with international partners. N+ and RUSAL are leaders in the climate agenda, and they have learned a lot and they have achieved a lot in their business processes. And looking back at past periods and thinking about who is the leader in the climate agenda, then maybe from the point of view of the participation in international platforms, the answer will be N+ and RUSAL. And please keep on the good work for N+ and RUSAL to become the leaders and the driving forces in the national field, and could help other companies do the same, follow the same pathway. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we can see by the example of RUSAL and N+, we can see that climate risks are very relevant. And the question is whether the companies will be able to overcome those risks. So next question to Evgeniy SHVARTS. Can the Russian companies achieve net zero given the resources they have and given the offsetting mechanisms, which are quite weak at the moment in Russia? Thank you very much. Olga, I would like to do a little bit of rephrasing of your question. Just let's put it clearly. Maybe some ideas which have not been discussed sufficiently yet. In the global markets, where we have global mechanisms and we have the demand and supply mechanisms, we have only 40 companies operating in those markets, and RUSAL is one of them. I'm not sure that RUSAL's management will agree with me, but I think that was a genius solution, leaving RUSAL one Russian company which is listed with Hong Kong Stock Exchange. I mean, this is the only company which knows exactly what it says and what it means. Just let's be honest. I always prefer to be honest and open. The tasks that has been set and are being set by the Economic Development Ministry are quite are not quite realistic, because those people who want international capital, then yes, they need all this. But voluntary certification like Aluminum Stewardship Initiative and others, well, they are important for those who deal in transborder sales. We don't have in the country a lot of companies with not even verified reporting, well, like our ministry says, but, well, simply because we don't have them. And the mission of RUSAL, given that, is growing even more important, because one of the biggest problems in the Russian economy and in the Russian business circles is that we have only few companies who care, for whom it is important to be competitive in the global markets. And I don't think I will be blamed by you, but these nice figures that you have shown for low carbon power generation, I think even those figures are too self-oriented, because this is a Soviet heritage maybe, although many people will disagree with me, but this is an excellent foundation that you should make use of. And I think the company does it. And well, we can discuss, it's quite for discussion whether you can only buy low carbon power from HPPs, or in order to fast track some developments in Krasnoyarsk, we may as well use gas in addition to HPPs in order to achieve, yeah, well, it's clear, the purpose is clear. But I mean, such companies which are in the forefront and who make use of it, well, this is a good example of a company like that, because all the other players, I mean, I have a joke. I say that girls love strong men and not weak men. But unfortunately, most of the businesses in Russia at the moment are weak men. And they want to play with something and just pretend they are strong, but they are not. And RUSAL does not pretend. RUSAL is strong, and it deserves good attitude and deserves serious appreciation, I think. Now, well, you've mentioned that rating agencies have withdrawn their ratings for the companies. Well, this is a common problem for all the businesses at the moment, and I think the situation is clear, but no one said that it will be easy. No one said it will be easy. So that's the point, because in the forestry, for example, FSC system pulled out completely. What shall we do? Like with the carbon units certification, like Vera is gone, but now we have global carbon compact. Well, I'm not that optimistic compared to previous speakers and to some reporters who mentioned, who spoke about this at the Eastern Economic Forum, because Global Carbon Council does not deal with that many applications that they have been receiving recently. But you have to have good dialogues. We should not compromise global standards, but now in the given conditions, we shall be searching for an appropriate verifying agent. So in the global political agenda, that will become a kind of a new mainstream, like FSC, they pulled out. Now, Lesnoy Talon is a replacement for them. And while the system has been developed, and there are 6 auditing firms now, and I think 10 certificates have been issued in 6 or 7 regions, and it helps the businesses to preserve many hectares of forest land. Now, another important thing to mention is that if you go ahead, you can't avoid mistakes. You shall not be afraid of that. I appreciate very much Elena and your team, who were not scared in the right time to publish a short, concise article saying that not every tree planting project is a climate project. Is not a forest carbon project. So I don't want to disclose what I should not disclose, but after that, the Minister of Economic Development has somehow engaged, and they improved their bills, their laws, and they now distinguish between the forest carbon project and some adaptation or offsetting projects. Just let's call apples the apples, because if this is an offsetting project, it should be an offsetting project. So if it's in a federal forestry project, me being the head of the team for forests, I was last week we had a meeting with the leaders of Rosleshoz, and for the first time in my experience, well, maybe not well, at least we were heard and our point was taken. And I think now this message will be conveyed to higher levels. So you shall not be afraid of speaking out, because in the situation we are in, you will make mistakes, and that's okay to make mistakes. And I don't want to dwell on it, but it's an important point. Well, in Glasgow, the decision was made that there cannot be forest projects longer than 45 years of project life. And my colleagues, my honored colleagues, give interviews and they discuss projects with a lifespan of 70 years. Well, guys, the world has changed and there will be impact of what we can see. We have grown up and the world is changing. And just to be serious, saying that we're going to make assessment of projects with a lifespan of 70 years, well, I don't think it's serious. It's not serious, I think. Then another guy says that we're going to sell to China and to India, and they will in turn make exports to the US and to the European Union. And I don't know, doesn't he know that in 2013, one of the largest laminating wood, floor wood producer in the US had to pay fines, huge fines, because in the documents, well, there was some mismatch about the origin of the wood. The document said that it was from Russia, but it was from France. So it was Lombardy liquidators. I mean, the founder of the company was dismissed, and the company had to change its name after that situation. I mean, just let's learn lessons. I don't have any doubts that Chinese have learned their lesson from that story. I mean, from that situation. We can export wood to China, but at a lower price, maybe 30 or 40% a lower price, because it will be consumed internally in China.
Thank you so much. The topic of compensation of emissions and forest and climatic projects and polygons, we have been raising it at the meetings of our climatic partnership, and ROMANOVSKAYA has been participating in some of those meetings, and we have concluded that without regulations internally, this system wouldn't work. Have you advanced regulation-wise? What is now happening to climate projects? Without this compensation, this wouldn't work. We could not attain and achieve carbon neutrality and net zero. Thank you so much, colleagues, for participation. Our partnership for climate preservation, we happily take part in RUSAL's events because everything you do is really quality driven. Thank you so much for the invitation for this really fascinating discussion. I'm really impressed by your results, and I have noted climatic goals. I have traced already, but there's a demand for a low. There's 25% out of the entire amount. This my congratulations. That's great. I would agree with you, Eugene, and other speakings that RUSAL and PLUS are trailblazers in our country, and we used to discuss, for example, how everything is difficult for us after the 24th of February. Last week, I was in Geneva. We had a meeting of experts of IPCC on their own questions. We haven't seen each other for a long time since the onset of the pandemic. We had a lot of things to discuss. Not only the situation after the 24th of February, if we look broader, today the climate agenda is at danger in many countries. This is not just the problem for our countries, and the measures countries have to take after the 24th of February, the situation in any organization that would like to meet climatic and sustainable goals is jeopardized. And this agenda that we have here is faced by any country, every country who is thinking climatically. And I think that was said by Maxim Reshetnikov. It's obvious that climate is the topic that can become for us the point of unification and unity. And we should not skip this agenda. Of course, what RUSAL and EN Plus is doing, it's not just cost effective for these companies. That's of course so, but this is a strategically important area for Russian company to show that this agenda we're going to follow would help us to get back into the global standard and fit into the global standard. It's clear that Andrey, for example, has said that Russia has a great potential in emissions reduction. Carbon capturing, for example, it's part to long-term strategy to mitigate GHG emissions. How we would do that, that's another question, but we have a high potential. And this is because our technologies of energy efficiency and resource saving is lagging behind the global standards. That's why we have the potential. And this, let's turn towards the East carbon units. Let's take, for example, the Chinese standards. So it against underscore that climate agenda in the Russian Federation itself self-sufficient. It should be here and develop here so that we can develop internally and meet the technological global level, but not just to sell some carbon unit to China, for example. This should well be understood. What does it mean to build the system in Russia? Of course, RUSAL has started to run forestry projects because it's clear that waiting for the system to be built, we can wait for 10 years and it gives units, not today because forests will be generated just in 10 years. Of course, we make errors and have to be capable to learn on the errors that we have made. And this experience that has been accumulated in collaborating with RUSAL and EN Plus, it's painful, it's useful for me because not just because we have, for example, errors in our projects. These errors are present in many international standards that enable to make fake results. And this is part, for example, of Californian system, for example. And on the other hand, we are starting to realize that those projects that work well in other countries would fail in our case because we have other specifics. That's why, of course, those standards for the climatic projects, for forestry projects have to be unique in Russia. And you should not agree to those decision makers who say just take what you have available around and do. We can make more harm than make use of. And I am confident that the standards to be used and applied to systematic, for example, forestry projects have to be of high quality in Russia. We are a rich country. We have a lot of ecosystems. We have to care about them. of course, and the focus in those projects should not just be on carbon, but we have to look holistically on the system, services, biodiversity, and we have to always speak about the reliability of the results that we have reached. Any Russian carbon unit should persuade the customer that all the risks have been included, the forest has not been burned. This system we have to build, and we'll build it together. And we would like to conclude with a story about the publication of 2 drafts to standards in forestry and forest preservation from fires. Based on that, what we have worked on together with RUSAL, those are live documents. Of course, they have to be applied, errors should be found, and we have to show what should be revised, and this should be constantly updated, of course. And also GKA has said that we have touched upon the ratings system. So far, we do not have access to rating agencies abroad. EGKR decided to start a Russian-based climatic rating, which is comparable in quality and results with GP, and has to allow, for the first time, our Russian companies not to fit into existing ratings developed for other countries, and we are starting to catch up, but to get a list of points that reflect activities inside Russia, carbon free areas, climatic projects, all those relevant issues inside Russia that are relevant for climate change activities. And in the end of September, we're going to distribute this questionnaire, and we will try building this first rating in the beginning of 2023. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anna. In the mainstream of the climatic agenda, we have the Moscow Exchange. Last year, the Moscow Exchange has held an international forum where the most important topic was responsible investment. And my question is, they had a sustainability Director Maxim KOCHETKOV, who is today responsible for meeting climatic commitments, and which challenges are faced related to meeting those commitments.
Olga, thank you very much. Yes, that was a very curious discussion. Thank you very much for those discussions. And we were trying this year to take some voluntary action and participate in some charity projects. I mean, I'm talking about the Moscow Exchange, Stock Exchange. We don't have enough internal expertise, so we would approach you if we may, just not to make mistakes as we start. So if you don't mind. So who cares? Who cares about this? I mean, Irina cares and Elena cares. It has always been interesting and important for them. We have heard a lot of speeches that you made previously at previous roundtables. But when you go back to your company, when you go back after some conferences, you go back to your office and you have different people around you, not people that we see now around us. But for example, you have a deputy CEO for finance, for example, and for economic development. And you bring a project to his attention to capture carbon, but he says, no, NPV is negative and we can't raise it to the level of the board. They will just kill us. Just let's wait. Let's just put it on hold. Does it happen like this? Well, we immediately go to the CEO level, to the C-suite executives. Oh, okay, you try to just to bypass them, right? The CFO, right? You try to bypass them. Okay, well, even if you go to the board level, it's not that obvious that there will will make a decision, because, well, you can see people there on the board. Well, Evgeniy sits on the board of RUSAL. Yeah, or maybe, oh, yeah. Well, yes, RUSAL. Well, are you alone there who supports the sustainable development? No, I'm not, Evgeniy SHVARTS says. Okay, happy for you. But nevertheless, the problem exists. And we, as Moscow Exchange, we realized that we are a stakeholder. We can see our own mission as the stock exchange. Our mission is to develop the market and to develop the market mechanisms. And by doing this, we will create economic stimulus for economic and climate improvement projects. If the government says you have to do that, well, everybody will try to bypass that and to avoid it. But if the market dictates it, and if the blind hand guided by the market says that you have to do that, then NPVs will immediately become positive and the projects will just be developed. So in September, there was a hallmark event, as it was a test trial on the Moscow Exchange. Well, not alone, we were not alone. We have some partners, joint venture between Moscow Exchange, Gazprom Bank, and some others. We are now introducing a registry of carbon units. And end of September, we are planning to start trading carbon units for the first time. What's important about this is there will be market pricing. There will be balance between demand and supply, and we will see who will buy and who will sell, and then we will get the price. The pricing will happen. And when we understand that, for example, 1 ton costs 3,000 rubles, then it will become clearer what projects can become effective, cost effective or not, or if we use a different technology, CCS technology, well, here the economics become better. And if the price, for example, is 4,000, but we expect the demand to grow, then we can take this risk. And so the economic judgment will come into play as soon as you can see the price per 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. Well, because, for example, now we have only speculations what the prices can be. There may be different prices. If there is demand for, I don't know, Bitcoin, for example, there is demand for Bitcoin, and the price is quite high. It's quite expensive, although it's not tangible. But CO2, at least there is some base foundation for that. There is some climate platform. So there is some platform foundation to assess the price for carbon. And plus, and we respect you a lot, and this is a good report that you've made. And plus is maybe the biggest player in that market, because we can see you have your own climate projects, and by absorbing carbon, you can register carbon units in our registry and then sell them to someone. And at the same time, you being targeting the net zero, that will be a stimulus for you to buy. I mean, for example, if you can say that we want to be net zero, but then why would we buy? But for example, let's imagine all the HPPs are on Angara cascade for you, and then there is drought there, low water levels. Well, it happens. Evgeny, can it happen? Well, God forbid, but nevertheless, well, for instance, you expected 1 water level, and there is a low water level, and then you asked for to conduct a study, and the projections say that you will have only good water levels during autumn, and then all the rest of time you will have to use coal generation, which you want to transform to gas, but I'm not sure whether you will do that. But maybe there won't be any gas supplies. But nevertheless, okay, what will you do? Well, you promised, you committed that you will be net zero, and now you have to use your coal-fired assets of Evrosibenergo. Then the carbon unit, demand for carbon units in the Moscow Exchange will start growing because of that event. Because this is the way the market works. Some news appear, and then investors start responding, and the speculators also, they come into play. The same with oil, like someone wanted oil originally, someone wanted to buy oil, and others wanted to sell oil, but after that those just players, market players came into play, and they just speculative trading started, and the same will happen, and the same happens on the Moscow Exchange now. Like see what the news say, what the reporters say, and then investors start trading. By the way, internal demand. They always ask us, what about Russian investors? At the beginning of the year, we had 16 million of individuals, individual investors, retail investors. And now we have 21 million at this time. Now, well, plus 5 million. You see, that's the potential. Then, if the Russian investor, investor wants to buy carbon units, I don't know, from N+, for example, well, let him or her know what you're doing. Or go ahead and just explain what you're doing. Just if you want to buy and sell on the Moscow exchange, just we would prefer if you want to do both, buy and sell. If you want to preserve your capital, you just sell, you just buy and then you sell. I mean, it's that's the target for mass media and for the journalists to explain how it works, to attract investors, make it appealing for them, explain about hedging and the finance companies. For example, another example from me, we are a regular company. For example, a regular IT company, and we are an IT company in some sense, but nevertheless, we have a green energy contract signed, and here we are covered. But what shall we do with our heat footprint? Or, I mean, the heat that we use? Well, you don't have to be a regular IT company to care about this. A lot of people came to RUSAL and to N+ when IREX departed from the market, and everybody realized that you can find replacement for electricity. But what about heat? What about, and I don't know, breweries use a lot of heat and a lot of steam. Then we have aluminum refineries. They also have a huge thermal footprint. Okay, well, CHPs, yes, we have CHPs. We have CHPs that produce steam. Yes, yeah, this is part of the aluminum division of RUSAL. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so there is a complicated way, well, we thought, to replace centralized heating with something else, low carbon, but that will be a complicated way and expensive. There may be a simple way. Come to the market, carbon unit market, and buy them. And then you don't need any IREX. You just go to the market and buy. And so that's approximately what I'm talking about. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to take them.
Colleagues, we have questions from our audience regarding the site, and it's for all our experts. I would read them aloud, and I would think we will take some of them until the end of the event. Which body can coordinate the activities of Russian companies and the way for net zero? Would there be some independent steps over decades? Whether we need any National Climatic Council or the Ministry of Economic Development is enough for that? Who can answer and comment upon that? I think that in many countries, this role is played by the climatic regulation, state climatic regulation. It's missing in our case. This is what is called voluntary regulation as carbon projects. This is not regulation, basically. And I think that the only way to, I would say, unite all the companies and make their work at the same pace, so there's some direction is regulating the carbon prices in some way. And the question from the audience. I have a small Olga Senatova. Question from Maxim. The worse the situation with greenhouse emissions in Russia, it's better for the Moscow exchange. You can differently treat any market event. And basically, you cannot say that we are earning on some grief and then we are earning on some winning, for example. We will become demagogic in this case. We're earning on market movements. Market is playing back certain events. Investors want to save their capital. They're selling something or buying something when they want to earn. They are not earning money on some tragic events. No, we are helping people just conserve their capital. This is our mission. We're helping them earn money. Are we making some bad fortune on that? Well, I wouldn't say that. Probably my colleagues will help me answer. I would answer like this. If, for example, colleague would set a price as this carbon registry is trying to do, as a result of market competition, Rosneft will buy carbon units in Venezuela and the market will work and the registration price will drop in this case, you know. We had another question as well, and for the representatives of RUSAL and N+, in developing the technology, green technology, equipment, are you engaging any startups that have shown themselves as at the front line of such initiatives? Local startups, almost all larger Russian companies have their own accelerators and growing startups internally. And Plus and RUSAL has a long-term history with the Skolkovo Foundation on technological startups. We have met colleagues and considered the program for this year. There were certain pause, of course, because of the circumstances where Irina, technical directorate, is tightly cooperating with the foundation, selecting those technologies that are promising, and any platforms where I have been on any chance. Of course, there have been some interesting suggestions, for example, including new climatic stories on watering we gotten from Aegean Alliance, and Andrey SHARONOV suggested us to get acquainted with the initiated. We're at a strategic session of Bank, and they announced a lot of interesting projects in monitoring and measuring of ecological emissions by cities, for example. Also, we met initiators and we're having those meetings consistently, and what we've been mentioning, interacting with the financial structures inside the perimeter, inside the budget of Sustainability Directorate for this year. We have the budget. We have a consistent budget for those R&D developments. We are collaborating with R&D institutes in research or technological development, which is developed in contact with the technical directorate. Another question from our audience: are there ratings of countries connected with the Nadir plans? What criteria are used for countries to meet those Nadir goals? I think that those ratings, there are a number of them. Non-governmental organizations are maintaining them. There is a climate action tracker, for example, and there you can look them up, and they are assessing based on the goals provided as a national contributions under the Paris Agreement provided by countries on the program by 2030, and those activists, they are looking and evaluating how the goal is ambitious, or they say how many degrees by 2030 is resulted by those goals. Stopping subsidizing for coal plants, would it help achieving net zero faster? I can say, for example, well, basically, look, I like this topic, I like this energy subject. Of course, coal generation is the main contributor to emissions, and Eugene would probably agree, but now it's irreplaceable. And when we speak, let's, for example, drop it, speak with Kazakhstan or India and their energy balances, and we should discuss what would we suggest instead? Just using fires, because we have got used to electric energy, just disconnect us from power for 1 hour, and we would say just this is carbon neutrality. In 1 hour, you will start revising your ecology goals. Here, of course, there is a technology, and probably Eugene would add, where carbon technology can capture CO2 on coal CHPs, and we have to follow this way on carbon generation, and this would pay by carbon prices. When they see that, on the one hand, they are pressed by lack of investment, and there is also carbon pricing, and price, demand and supply with balancing, and those projects will become profitable. But anyway, they will do that because there is this carbon capture and storage technology. It's not always economically viable, but the approach is like this. I would agree in the main point with Maxim. You cannot build communism overnight, and 21 years I have been nature protection director in Russia, and I well know this point by India, for example. If we saw, for example, that certain statements are not fitting well with what can be well explained to Russian people, say we have this memorandum was blocked in India because they said that, guys, well, our today's level of life for a certain percentage of population just doesn't allow us to adopt this. And I would say that the most populist but beautiful solution, what has been mentioned, also can be viable, because by and large, India has taken a commitment for 2070, reaching net zero. Well, politicians just probably say that whatever happens after us, let it happen. Other questions probably. Is it known by the end of 2022 we would have some national technique and standard for forestry, which is retaining, are the onsets, for example, for implementation for those initiatives? Lack of standards today could result in chaotic behavior in emission capturing. Are you sharing this point or not? This is not a standard. There's just 12 standards, what we have already discussed before the meeting, on how many sites we have mentioned that this is needed and required, and experts and practical guides are ready to participate, but in the news we're getting those headers, headlines, and we just want to see whether we are participating or just getting a final document. Yes, thank you so much for the question. And well, basically, it's said specifically that at the end of 2022, there's going to be forest climatic standards. I don't know anything about that. Those 12 standards, I don't know what would be their quality and whether we need them. Of course, all the standards basically should be publicly discussed broadly, and we do not have this. And those standards that have been approved and that have those assigned numbers that have been badly translated from English, basically, they're just horrible. Before doing like those 12, like let's correct the previous one. This is a huge question. That's not just about standards. That's about the federal legislation, for example. And coming back to those painful things like 1509, this federal law about forest on agricultural lands. Yes, we could do forestry and climatic projects there. So do we need forests there, or they have to be cut? And standards would not solve this. This is an end-to-end issue. It should be solved, of course, partially. I agree, and I would say I came to a conclusion that you should not just trying to conquer this standard and defeat the standard of standard creation, because as soon as the business sees that the standard is not working, they would not follow. And so the authors will correct, for example, there would be some international or voluntary standard, something like that. For example, our Ministry of Agriculture, they have been trying to conquer as soon as we got the some area of exported forests, we just could have succeeded in that. 1959 statement was really greatly cut and curtailed. You can just cut this forest and make it agricultural, for example, because we are having up to the year 2000, 70 million of hectares have been just filled by forest, and we have been raising the export of forest and agricultural products. We had a wrong extensive model, but I understand why the Ministry of Agriculture has done everything to cultivate that, because the Ministry of Agriculture doesn't want to lose 59 billion from the budget, and to cut this off, and this would also grow in. That's how we have lost the Soviet Union after this amelioration project. Because if we have a forest and agricultural land, what has been done in reforestation, we can just, that would become ridiculous. But I have no doubt that the company, the country has no other choice than come back. When we are starting counting money again, we have to be aware that all our agriculture from Volga to Kaluga region, it's more cost efficient because of cooperating with forest lease. And this is well known from many publications, for example, mine. Another question, we have just 3 minutes left, how to get industry involved and ecologic production. What are the state programs in this respect? How actively is business implementing ecological innovation? So entrepreneurs are just using some well-known methods. And another question, what is requested from the mass media to communicate those right ideas?
I think, well, there is a well-recognized tool for that purpose at the level of large businesses. We have developed our own methodology, and we started using it to evaluate maturity of our ESG maturity of our suppliers, of our vendors. First, we decided to look at vendors of the most important raw materials and power. But as we started doing that, we found out that smaller businesses, middle-sized businesses that supply PPEs and supply some services to us, they realized that we can do that for them free of charge, and as opposed to banks. And they respect us. They think we're reliable, and they're ready to do that with us. As soon as they see that there are some preferences for them, that they're being selected as vendors for larger businesses because of that, and that they will be remunerated for that, well, that will work as a motivation for them. Speaking about the country, we said it many times that the green sales will work. This mechanism of green sales, as soon as the government says that green businesses, green services, green products will be supported, will be remunerated, and because from the point of view of ESG standards, it's not only about the prices, but this is also about the promotion in the market. So we need a clear sign to the market that this is what is welcomed in the market. Okay, I agree. But another important thing, I think, is that in addition to global financial mechanisms, we should have some minimum, at least minimum requirements from the government, from the state. For example, we have a form, a report which covers all the wastes and carbon emissions. It's a closed report, not an open report. So this is a field, huge field for corruption. The company reports and it's not disclosed, although there are some requirements. And so this watchdog, environmental watchdog in Russia, they should stop reading those reports internally. They should start performing their functions, and then the Moscow Exchange will immediately get a tool. For example, they will realize that listed companies, well, these are the listed companies, and they have those levels of specific emissions according to governmental reports, and that will be an obvious tool. Okay, we have only a couple of minutes for the closing remarks. I would like to thank you all for your participation, and let's go back to the idea that the reducing carbon footprint and our pathway to net zero can become a topic around which countries and people may get united. Hopefully our event today will contribute to this. I would like it very much. Thank you all.